The thoughts of both managers then. Let's head to Australia and speak to journalist Matthew Galea, who can give us his views on contenders against defenders, which is not you two. A perfect matchup. Hi, Matthew.
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
Oh, absolute pleasure. There's a tiny delay, but that will probably help me. For you, Matthew, are you still talking about the weekend that's just gone? What are the feelings from Australia?
Yeah, I think the feelings over here have been that it was a really exciting game between two amazing teams. The quality on display was unreal, a bit like Klopp was saying post-game. When you see the top two teams take on each other, that's the sort of football you want to see. You want to see an open game with, teams really going at each other's throats, and I think it had all the hallmarks of classic, Premier League football between two teams really vying for the title.
Absolutely, but has it changed Liverpool's thinking? Do you think they've shifted that mentality now, as Jason was saying, to be proper title contenders?
Yeah, I think in the position they're in, they have to believe that this is the year that they take home the Premier League title. They have in previous years been in strong positions and let it slip, and I just don't think that this season that will happen again. If there was a team that could hunt them down, it would definitely be Pep and City. But this Liverpool team, they don't stop running. They're so intense in every game that they play, and they're starting to turn those games where they would previously perhaps lose or drop points. They spoke about the draws last season. They're starting to turn those games into wins, with last-minute goals, penalties, however they can get them. They're finding ways to win. So from that perspective, I find it hard to see them really letting this one slip. The only thing that might count against them is obviously the extra games with the Club World Cup and the extra schedule, how they cope with that. But other than that, I think that it's theirs for the taking.
Matthew, do you agree with Pep when he said after the game that his team played like champions?
They actually played well. They did play well. I don't know if they played like champions. And they were a bit unlucky with some things. Obviously, the VAR call in the build up to Liverpool's first goal. But they did play well, and it's just one of those things where I don't know if they struggle with the Anfield factor. Guys like Aguero not taking chances that he would certainly take anywhere else in England, wherever he's playing. But I don't know if I agree they played like champions, but they certainly played well. And on another day, if they weren't 2-0 down after 15 minutes, certainly well enough to perhaps win the game.
Matthew, do you think there's anything different about Liverpool this season from last season? There seems to be more of a feel that they are definitely sort of almost determined and destined to win this league.
Yeah, I think you can definitely see the hunger and determination in the Premier League to force themselves or will themselves over the line and get those 3 points. They seem a lot more assured in the way that they go about their game, clinical in the real clinch moments of a game, be that in the opening minutes as they were against City, or in the dying minutes when they really need to pull a win out of a draw or a potential losing scenario. So I think that's probably been the biggest difference. And it will be interesting now to see how Klopp manages, I guess, the workload for the rest of the season, and if he really just prioritises the league at the expense of perhaps the Champions League even, or even the FA Cup or the Club World Cup.
Matthew, we've been giving ourselves a pat on the back that we're some 20 minutes in and have avoided VAR, but I'm going to ask you about it, because I know out in Australia you've been using it too with the A-League. How's it gone down there? Have you seen it adapt? Have you seen things change that you'd like to see implemented over in the Premier League?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think it's been in the A-League for a few seasons now, so I think the teething issues we're seeing in the Premier League aren't too dissimilar to what we saw in the A-League when it first came in, and those being, really inconsistencies with what's considered a handball, the fact that it's being used to review decisions that are still quite subjective. I I felt like in the A-League we were sort of turning a corner at the start of this season, particularly the first round. There were lots of games that sort of had big VAR decisions, and it just felt like it was being applied more consistently and more accurately. But as the season's gone on, it's sort of reverted to tight down under as well. So there's been a bit more controversy around its use and I guess the accuracy of its decisions. But I think we're in this position because we've sort of been chasing this ideal that, referees shouldn't be making mistakes and it shouldn't be costing team points. But the problem is the system's still being used to judge a lot of subjective decision. Is it a handball? Is the hand in an unnatural position? Is it a red card challenge? These sort of things. I think perhaps it should just be limited in scope to things like offsides, which as we've seen in the Premier League still causes some debate, but at least there's some point where you can say it's black or white, it's offside or it's onside, and perhaps it's steer clear from the more subjective decisions.
Matthew, one of the big issues in England has been they haven't used the pitch side monitors at all in any Premier League game so far. Was that a similar thing in Australia, or did the referees use them from the start?
No, they were very keen to get on the screens at the side, and they still do pretty much most decisions. I think other than offside, they pretty much go to the screens to have a look at. I'm not sure if the direction is different for Premier League referees than it is for A-League referees. Certainly you see VAR implemented differently in the Champions League as well. So it seems like we do get different sort of interpretations of how it can and should be used in different competitions.
All right, Matthew, thank you so much for your time. Really interesting stuff. Thanks for coming on.